So, to give a bit of context, this was nearly 10 years ago. This actually happened to my friend at the time named Alex. Now, Alex was a freshman year in high school, and most of the time he was home alone. He lived in a part of town that wasn't really the safest nor the greatest, but it was definitely an area where his parents can afford. Now, his brother was in college while Alex was still in high school at the time. Now, to give a bit of context to make it more believable, both of his parents worked the night shifts, so it was common for Alex to be alone. Now, when Alex got home, he was alone, and both of his parents, he had a cell phone at the time, set to call them if there was anything wrong. So far, when Alex walked in, the first thing he did was to get started on his homework. As he was going through his homework, he always wants to be the top class, so he always made sure his homework was neatly done. However, it wasn't until maybe a few hours later, while Alex was playing video games, he all of a sudden heard what seemed to be a knock at the door. Now, this was obviously really creepy, as whoever was knocking on the door, it definitely didn't sound like his parents. He checked outside, and when he checked outside through the mirror near the front door, he could see that there was a man standing around. This man seemed to be high on drugs, and he looked very weirded out. He started looking and staring at Alex without even acknowledging that someone was in the house. He asked the man if he could help him, but the man didn't say anything. Now, Alex ended up texting his dad, and his dad told him to leave the property or he called the cops. So that's what Alex did. Alex told the man to get off the property or he called the cops. The man, however, looked at him and then turned around and ran out of the property and ran down the street not to be seen for again. Now, Alex wasn't so sure as to why this man was targeting his house, but he didn't look like he was in any harm and trouble. The police, of course, decided to arrive since Alex decided to call the police and asked to take his statement. Now, the police arrived and took Alex's statement and said that they would update him if they find the guy. However, that wasn't until maybe around 11 and a night when Alex was going to bed. Just as he looked outside his parents' window that leads to the backyard, he looked to see that there was a strange figure standing in the backyard in the middle of it. Now, Alex ended up calling his 911 parents again, and they said to call 911 and that one of them was on their way home. As Alex was on the phone with the 911 operator, he looked to see if the figure was still there, and the figure somewhat was standing still. He didn't even try to break and entering. This was actually really weird since this man didn't seem like he'd do anything. He just stared right at him, not saying a word. Now, it was getting a little odd though, but he decided to keep his guard up and kept an eye on the man. As he had his eyes focused on the man, whatever it was looked straight at her, and of course at him. This man stared straight at him, and he looked really, really messed up. He didn't say anything, no scream, nothing. The police arrived, and of course they took the man, and the man didn't act like he he didn't act like he wanted to not be arrested. He didn't act like that, surprisingly. It was just really weird. But he wasn't so sure as to why this guy decided to target his place, but who really knows? It's definitely really creepy. The police arrived and they took this man in, but of course, there was no update regarding the man if he was ever let out free or not. Now, after this incident, Alex does get paranoid, thinking that someone was probably watching the house. He looked around just to make sure, but of course, he still gets paranoid about it even to this day. Still to this day, he doesn't even know what would have happened to him if he had let this man in. Was this man on drugs? Was he a homeless person? That was definitely something that is unsure to this day, and it still boggles his mind. So this was around sometime on Halloween. Not really on the actual day of Halloween, but this happened sometime around 2016. This was during the clown epidemic, and that was when the clown trend was getting popular. Now this happened to one of my closest friends, so of course, I am going to call her by the name of Caitlin. Now, Caitlin was in college at the time of this story, and that was when the clown sightings started to get really messed up and more crazy. Now, she was never scared of clowns, but ever since this incident, she really does have a fear for them. Now, to give a bit of background information, Caitlin, when she was younger, never really was fond of clowns at the time. Sure, she liked the nice clowns, but she never really liked the mean and nasty ones, especially ones when you consider them in horror movies. Now, something had happened to her around close to Halloween, and it was definitely a moment that she really didn't even know what to do or what to expect. Now, to give it a long story short, this was around the time when Caitlin was pretty much walking from the college campus to her house, and she only lived about a 5-minute walk from the campus. As she was walking to the from her campus back to her house, she ended up looking a few times. Now, when she looked back, she felt that someone was watching her or following her. She didn't even know what it was. So, the first night that this happened, she was pretty much just watching TV when the doorbell knocked. She went to go answer the door, and when she opened the door, there was nobody at the door. However, she was curious and thinking it could have been maybe one of her friends pranking her, so she texted them and asked if they were pranking. None of them said that they were pranking her, and they said they weren't doing anything. Now, Caitlin would at first thought that might have been maybe some other college kids. It wasn't until she decided to get a doorbell camera, and this is when she decided to get a doorbell camera, since she had got it for safety reasons. When she was home alone that one night, which was like a few nights after this incident, she was home alone and she was working on her homework. While she was working on her homework, she ended up hearing knocking coming from the front door again. This time she checked her phone, and she could see that it was a guy dressed in a clown costume. He was staring directly at the camera, and she didn't say anything, but she was obviously in shock that this clown somehow pretty much found her house. So she watched and waited, thinking what this clown would do. He was pretty much staring at her, as if she wasn't even there. She texted her mom about the clown showing up, and of course, that's when her mom tells her to call the cops. She ended up cursing out the clown, telling him to get off the property or she'd call the police. The clown didn't seem to acknowledge this, and he ran off. However, he didn't get very far, as a police officer came and knocked on her door and said that they had found the clown, the guy who dressed up as a clown, trying to go after the house. It turns out that he was pretty much stalking other people while trying to break in for the house while dressed as a clown. He has done this to other people, and most people who reported him, they have told him that he wasn't allowed to come anywhere near certain victims. Obviously, it was still pretty scary knowing that this clown had some ill intentions. Was it possible that he was going to pretty much kill her or kidnap her? That is definitely one question that really freaks Caitlin out. Now, ever since that day, Caitlin had been staying away from clowns, and she never went to a circus or any festival involving clowns, since she does get paranoid thinking that the clown is back for her, but nothing like that has ever happened, and she gets paranoid while home alone. Still to this day, she even wonders what would have happened to her if she had not called the police. Something bad could have potentially happened to her, and that it would have just been the case. Now, this happened to one of my friends in school, and of course, I am going to call her by her name Annabelle. Now, Annabelle was pretty much living at her by herself at this point, as she was living with an apartment with her boyfriend, as they wanted to be close to the college campus. So, pretty much Annabelle had a phobia of clowns ever since she was little. There was something about the clowns that really freaked her out. She wasn't so sure, but ever since she was a kid, she has always been terrified of clowns. Something really freaky happened to her that day, and she obviously doesn't even know where to begin. Now, it turns out when she was sleeping, maybe be a few nights before this incident, she ended up hearing someone walking around the property. She ended up looking around but couldn't seem to find anyone outside other than some people occasionally going to smoke. But that's just mainly about it. There was nothing really too much going on, so at first she didn't think much of it. It wasn't until maybe a few minutes later when she ended up hearing someone knocking at the front of her apartment. She ended up looking out thinking that there was someone there, but there was absolutely no one there. So, fast forward about maybe a few days later, Annabelle was home alone as her boyfriend was out partying. And while Annabelle was pretty much working on her assignments for school, she ended up looking over for her door, and unfortunately, he had no idea as to if there was someone really watching her from the inside of the apartment. She, of course, went down to the front and talked to the people of the apartments and let them know what was going on, and they said that they would look into the problem and they would alert her if anything. Now, something really freaky had happened when Annabelle was pretty much getting ready for bed. As she was getting ready for bed, she ended up lying down on the bed while looking at her phone. Her boyfriend was going to be staying over at a friend's house since he was drunk. So as Annabelle was texting, she ended up deciding to look under the bed. Why she decided to look under the bed was because there was something she had been saving for school. So when she looked under the bed, she could look to see that there was a clown costume. At first she thought that maybe her boyfriend threw it down there or something, but she ended up looking and saw that it was a human person hiding under her bed. Thankfully, he didn't notice her, and that's when Annabelle grabbed her phone and raced to the bathroom where she locked herself in and called the police. She explained to the police about what was going on and about that clown she saw under the bed. As the police were on their way, she ended up hearing what seemed to be shouts and screams a few moments later. As she was listening to the screaming and shouting, being followed by someone getting tased, a cop enters the apartment building and knocks on the bathroom door. So when Annabelle opened the door, the police had said that this guy was dressed as a clown costume, and apparently he had been found hiding under their beds and closets, pretty much anywhere you could think of. He had been doing this for a while in the people's apartments, mainly to stalk them. Now, as a matter of fact, he was taken away, but there was no real evidence as to if this guy was going to kidnap her, rob her, or whatever. That was definitely something that Annabella had concerned. Now her boyfriend doesn't left her home alone since then, but it wasn't until maybe a few years later where the guy that dressed as a clown was there. He apparently was let out for good behavior, but there was no update as to where he is or what has happened to him. All Annabelle and her boyfriend can hope that he is getting the help that he needs, but who really knows if that was the case or not? There's no hope, no way of knowing entirely if that's the case.